Yeah, I think people need to prepare for hard times when it comes to food, and any product, and think about access to these products. Who's going to access the products? It's not going to be the working class. It's probably not even going to be the middle class. It's going to be the the top kind of 1%.
Jamie, welcome to the Oxford Talks podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good,
Amazing.
and thank you very much for the invitation.
Jamie, for those of us who don't know who you are and what do you do, how would you describe yourself?
So my name is Jamie Burrows. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called A Vertical Future. I'm in my late 30s, 3 kids, and have been doing this business now for about 10 years. And we are the independently voted number one controlled environment agriculture company for 2 years running now. So I'm sure we'll get a lot into this, but basically we build technologies that go into fully integrated vertical farms and build them for people and plant science and all kinds of other really cool things to address
Amazing.
big challenges.
So, there's a lot to sort of uncover there. So, for the listeners out there, what is controlled environment agriculture? What is vertical farming? And for the people who have never heard of this before,
So controlled environment agriculture in the most basic of definitions would be exactly what it says, controlling the environment of something that's been an agricultural product or some other type of plant that would otherwise be grown through traditional methods outside. So what it's doing is eliminating the variability that exists when you're growing outside. So in countries where it's too hot or too cold, or where you're subject to seasonality, in every country, you can literally have a day within a CEA facility where you can simulate the conditions of I don't know, let's say June 30th, and it's 26 degrees and humidity is X, right? Which might be the perfect condition for a plant. You can do that 365 days a year, constant. And you can do that without pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. It's brilliant for health. You can, obviously, it's very, very clean. We don't use soil as well, which is incredibly
just like hydroponics.
So hydroponic systems, aeroponic systems, there are different ways, but it's technically the same thing in many respects. We're taking water and we're putting nutrients into it, and then regulating the amount of nutrients and
Yeah.
frequency. If I talk about CEA in its kind of tiers, so a glass house or a greenhouse is technically CEA. So you've got these really high-tech glass houses, but they obviously have they're still subject to some variability because they have the sun, right? And in especially in some of the hotter geographies, you have to spend a lot of money cooling them because of that sun coming in. Even in the UK, if you don't have your aircon running, a greenhouse or high tech greenhouse or glass house could reach 50 degrees. So our specific technology and business focuses on something that's called vertical farming, which is a subset of CEA. And what it does is it adds on additional elements that eliminate the variability and eliminate the operational bottlenecks of other types of farming. So we grow food, and also we're doing forestry and other things as well in stacked layers.
Yeah.
We use a lot of robotics to move the plants around so that you don't have to have humans in the environment potentially bringing in pathogens and infecting plants. and everything's automated from end to end and governed or monitored by a software as a service product called Diana, which we've created in-house.
Amazing. Jamie, I'm going to come to that and again in a second. I was going through the research that we were doing, and it was so fascinating to me. How on earth an engineer who was working at United States Air Force turned out to be a technologist, I guess, who is tackling farming around the world? How did that transition happen?
Life. No, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, I left school at 16. I joined US Air Force because, I'm half American, um, something in my family. So, I found myself in a 35 degrees of heat in Texas from one day to the next after getting on a plane in Heathrow when I was 16 and was an F-15 avionics technician. So I did all the training in places like Mississippi and stuff for that. Ended up in Florida. Then got into the academy, the US Air Force Academy, because through really good SAT scores and physical fitness. It's a bit like Sandhurst for the British listeners.
Yes. Yeah.
Spent, a couple of years there, decided I didn't want to be a pilot. That was my dream. But for various reasons, I came back home. And then, yeah, I think I've done so many things. I paid for most of my studies through DJing in clubs like Ministry of Sound, The Egg, and so I did that for I don't know, going on 8 or 9 years. So I did.
Are you still DJing?
I don't have time to DJ now with 3 kids. I certainly don't do laptop DJing. I prefer like I'm a traditionalist, so like vinyls and stuff like that. And I also produced a few songs on Ableton. But yeah, definitely like it's always live. But yeah, maybe a couple of days a year.
Yeah.
So I did 3 degrees. I worked in bars and things and restaurants as well. Throughout that period. My first degree was at Buckingham, and that's where I met my wife Marie, who ended up being my co-founder and mother to our 3 children.
Amazing.
And then I went on to Cas Business School in London to do energy trade and finance. And then I had a couple of offers. I could have gone down the investment banking route, and
You were quite good at it. You were writing theses and all of that, and that's what really amazed me. That
I didn't know you pick up the. I've never had anybody who's ever picked up on my
we
private equity. I can't even remember the name of my thesis.
I think it's something to do with the evaluation of I think private stocks or something.
I
If
mean, you
I'm
know it better than me, clearly. Like, I mean,
we
but I certainly didn't. That was my main paper at Cas Business School. So it was energy trade and finance, but you could specialize in different things. And then, yeah, I kind of considered investment banking, had a load of interviews, had some offers, and then I had another offer from a strategic business unit at MSc,
yes.
and yeah, never really went to class, but ended up with distinction, which is
How did
quite.
that come about?
I don't know. I was playing online poker at home and doing trading. But also my bachelor's, I really didn't go to class. I used to just to go to tutorials
Yeah.
and meet people and build networks. So obviously, I'm not a very good example in that context, but I think that education and those environments are really about building networks. So, but no, to answer your question, so it was an MSc, and then the PhD. So this is when I decided to actually take this job up in North Wales. which was in a strategic business unit,
Yeah.
kind of working between the university and then entities like the NHS. So my first job was actually managing a £36 million build as a project manager. So I had to bring in a team from like different consulting firms, and also a legal team, and manage all that. So it was a big job actually. I can't remember how old I was, mid-20s at the time. But living up in North Wales was really nice, to have a good paying job
Yeah.
actually, for there, and living in such beautiful scenery was incredible. But that's when I did my PhD part time. However, I should caveat this by saying that I'm one paper away from getting the PhD completed, and that has been outstanding now for 10 years or more, which is
Are you gonna get it complete now?
I don't even know. We could be having this talk in 40 years and I haven't done it. No, I think the problem is I probably have to update some of the other papers, but no,
ChatGPT can help.
it certainly could, but I think it'd be picked up on now. But nevertheless, even though I didn't quite get that, it was a great experience, and it taught me many, many things and skills and types of analysis, because it was in health economics.
Yeah.
Specifically, it was in how do you how do you measure health, and also how do you effectively cut costs for major operations, and also there are a lot of ethical questions around, I don't know, if you have somebody that needs a new hip in orthopedics and they're 24 or 25, and you've got somebody else who's 80 and they need the same, who do you choose, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of big ethical questions. So yeah, long way of saying that I did the PhD, or almost PhD, um, uh, in my spare time,
It's
basically.
amazing. Jamie, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at this early life history, and one of the things that I got to know about you, that once I shared ages ago, I think I shared a LinkedIn post, and you comment. It was a quote from Leonardo da Vinci. Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth looking upwards, because that's where you have been, and that's where you long to return.
Exactly.
And you said in the comments to me that oh, I've stolen your favorite quote. Is that something? It's a constant theme of your life, that you have that history of you wanted to become a pilot, but you always tend to do, what can I do more? What can I do more? What can I do more? In some literal ways, you wanted to be a pilot, but is it doing all of this, which are really gigantic tasks? And I was even looking at your work, that I think I've never come across any person who has done a job at four of the big four. I think you worked at Deloitte, you worked at
I worked at 3.
EY. Yeah, so I think minus PwC, you worked at everyone. So that these are kind of high, they just don't take anyone from any random kind of like a kid. You have to be really good to be part of these big firms. So no doubt you're really talented in the work that you do. But is that the thing, that there's some longing that you want to do? Like, okay, there's a target that I have in front of me, and you want to tackle these gigantic tasks. We'll come to your current work with Vertical Future as well. But is that what you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been asked that question that way. I mean, and also just to caveat, I mean, I actually did get. I am a pilot. I got my pilot's license when I was 16, just turning 17, before I left for the U.S. military. Although not in fighter jets, and I did some flying when I was there, and I've got, I think, I don't know, 15, 20 hours in F-15s, but in the back seat.
Amazing.
So, but yeah, I just didn't, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't pursue, that kind of early childhood dream moving forward. So I don't know if your question links to my kind of longing to want to do that, or the fact that I didn't go down that route.
I think I meant it more along the line that these high, in a sense, these tasks like flying and being part of these specific firms, that they demand a lot of hard work as a precursor to where you want to be there. If to be a pilot, the precursor is you have to go through all of the work that you have to do with the consultancy firms, even the work that you're doing. And I feel like that's a constant theme in your life. You tend to keep on doing those things again and again, which even with Vertical Future right now, it's not something I can start today and tomorrow there's going to be results. You're almost a
Agreed.
decade into the work, and maybe now you might be saying. So I feel like, is that something that you have a feeling that I'm okay with it not yielding results tomorrow? I'm gonna go for the long run.
I uh, I have I don't know. I mean, I'm clearly ambitious. And yes, as you mentioned, I've worked at the top consulting firms and in some prestigious positions, and we'll go on to talk about my current role. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what really. I think I could kind of distill your question down into kind of what drives me, and like for example, I had a great deal of respect for my parents who, they both passed away when I was in my late 20s before I set up Vertical Future. And my mother, for example, was incredibly successful. And not to say that my dad didn't work very, very hard, but she was incredibly successful in terms of the role that she took on. She ran an NHS, um, you know, um, county for I think 6 years. So it was not a county because it's different in Wales, but she ran the North Wales NHS for 6 years. As an American, she'd come over here and she worked her way up from being a bacteriologist in a lab to, to a CEO. And one of the longest serving ones, because it's pretty cutthroat.
Yeah,
They slice and dice them once one or two mistakes are made. And so I've always really looked up to my mother, and I think I think maybe that has been a big driver for going for these types of roles and pushing forward.
that's amazing. Coming to Vertical Future, that is a big one. Tell me what made you decide that this is something you want to get into? What was the kind of motivation behind? Kind of talk me through the early days of starting Vertical Future.
So when so my last role at my last role before Vertical Future was at a company called IMS Health, which merged with a company and became IQVIA. That it's a big data consulting firm. That was over at King's Cross, and I actually got fired from that. So because
How did that come about?
well, I jumped from EY, so I loved working at EY at London Bridge, and was already paid very well. And they came to me with almost like a COO type role for like a data program, and I don't know, I didn't get on with my boss,
Yeah,
and these things happen, right? Some people, some really successful people, get fired in life, so I'm not ashamed to say that.
of course.
So I kind of, and to be honest with you, if you speak to my friends about this, I kind of wanted to leave anyway. So I was kind of
Mm.
on my way out and looking for another job, and maybe the company sensed that. So once I'd left there, um, I had a period of reflection, I would say, for about 6 months. So because my parents had passed, I had, not a great deal of cash, but at least enough uh, money at the time where I didn't have to work. And Marie, my wife, was looking after. We had, can't remember if we had two kids at the time or one. So no, we would have had one at the time. Yeah. And then yeah, I sat in a cafe for not literally for the whole 6 months, but living down in South London, in East Dulwich, I'd go to a cafe every day, and I would just sit and come up with ideas. I had 3 or 4 ideas on my shortlist. A very good friend of mine showed me vertical farming in America in shipping containers. And
As in, you saw them in person, or just like a conversation?
um,
The shipping containers you.
I, ooh, I think he sent me a link.
Okay, okay. I thought you
Yeah.
went there to America to see the container.
No, 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 not
Okay,
at all.
okay.
No, no, no. So he sent me a link, and I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And it was around that time, or maybe 3 or 4 years before then, that that vertical farming had, started to kind of boom, and all the investors were all throwing their money at it, in all different directions. And I looked at it initially, and I was like, okay, well, this is really interesting, but I don't understand how that is going to solve food and water insecurity. I don't. I mean, obviously, it's applicable in some regions and not in others. But I just thought, in general, the model could be better, and that I could implement that model in London, that new model in my mind, in a better way. So I don't know how I came across them actually, but found a kind of working center type thing, a bit like the building we're in, right?
Like a space, like an
Yeah,
office
like
space.
like a
Yeah.
social space that they were starting to build. But actually, the first day I went in there, it was literally rubble. You had spray paint. I think they'd been using it for raves and things, and it was just nothing was done. Like I don't even think plug sockets were in. So found a room at the back and read a book on vertical farming, and then looked at equipment suppliers for very basic systems, because obviously I only had enough cash so I had to take a full debenture on all my assets. So the house that we were living in, if the business failed, the bank takes it back, and then HSBC were very kind at the time to give me £100,000 loan. I think around that.
And did your partner Marie, that you were in this together? Of course, you had to speak to her that this is what we're gonna do.
Yes, yeah, and she was fully supportive and has been always. She's, I founded the company, but I've always called her the co-founder, because it started as a family business, really,
Amazing.
and you need that support at home. And also, Marie's worked in Vertical Future in various capacities for many years. So anyway, set up this small hydroponic farm, and then the horror period of the first 3 years began, because nobody knew us. You're walking into your first prospective customers that might be 2 Michelin star chefs, or they might be from a I don't know, catering company.
Jimmy, just to backtrack, so you essentially wanted to grow your own kind of crops, vegetables, and fruits, and you wanted to sell it to restaurants in the UK, in London, to other people around.
Yeah, and also online.
Okay.
We started to there were multiple pathways, customer pathways that we
And
went down, but it was predominantly, I'd say 90% of the revenue was from restaurants. So and I say we, it was just me initially. I was working seven nights a week, starting at 7 p.m. and finishing at 6 a.m., and it was exhausting. And
yeah,
then I was getting kind of part-time students who just wanted a bit of cash and were willing to wake up at 6 or 7, and we would have delivery bags, with cool packs in them.
oh
And
wow,
we would literally send. So I'd be getting all the orders from the chefs at 11 p.m. Actually, sometimes going up to 1 a.m.
wow,
Doing the harvest, and then get everything prepped, and then literally, putting a sticker on the bag, name of the restaurant, and then
go there. Yeah.
using Google Maps to generate routes for the drivers, not drivers, sorry, the delivery people, and the delivery people would typically go on the tube, because
Wow.
this was the quickest way to actually get the produce to the restaurants.
Remind me some pictures of those guys in the tube
I
with
mean,
the
they used to annoy the hell out of any commuter. Can you imagine being a commuter and
wow,
you've got
yeah.
some delivery person standing there and they're literally holding the equivalent of probably four large suitcases if you were going on holiday or something on a
Wow.
long-term holiday. But hey, look, no,
No shame
nobody
in
ever
that.
said that you can't use a tube for food distribution, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we did
Jimmy,
that.
can I quickly ask, what did you decide to grow at the beginning?
So at the beginning, you are, and this gets into kind of the the limitations and the link with scale and technology. So at the time, because we had limited cash, it was a small farm, it made sense to grow obviously the most profitable crops. So it
Mm.
was very niche crops that we were growing at the beginning. So, we would grow edible flowers. We would grow microgreens, which I'm sure, everybody's heard of now. And, you've got these things where people say, grow microgreens at home
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff. But we also worked with companies like Chopped, where we were growing larger leaf products. We worked with Mindful Chef on a few occasions. And so small products, but always, with the exception of flowers, obviously, baby leaf things. Nothing like no like full head lettuces or anything like
Okay.
that, because the unit economics just don't work at that scale. And also, we'll probably go on to talk about it. The let's call them the inefficiencies of the technologies that we were using. We were using very basic stuff that most people were using and continue to use at the time.
Jamie, how would you, because I'm thinking that, so you're an entrepreneur with your family, you have started up essentially, let's say, a family business, and who's the one deciding that, okay, this is day one, this is what we're going to plant, let's see the first harvest. What did you know that the unit economics of if I plant this, there will be demand for that? Or you just went like, okay, let's just try start with what we like, what would work. And then, as you said, like a 3 year of kind of like a period where you just didn't know what to grow. What was that period like in terms of the crops itself? You had prior knowledge, or it got sort of redundant immediately and you had to sort of backtrack? And because it's not a software product that 3 lines of code and it's a different thing.
Exactly.
It's 6 months. And yeah, walk me through that, because I would love to know how what's the life cycle of these things as well, because some crops take long, some take short. I would love to know what happened in those first 3 years.
The great, I'll answer the end of the question first, because that's the easiest. If you're growing microgreens, with the exception of edible flowers, I mean, that is a very quick turnaround, right? Hence the name microgreens. So any plant at some stage is going to be a microgreen. So it's just a smaller version before it starts developing,
Yeah.
developing out, and its morphology starts changing. And you plant them very, very densely, so they grow in a particular way, and so on. So you're only looking at like 10, 10 to 13 day growth cycle, depending on products. So very, very fast turnaround. I went on Amazon and bought a book on microgreens for people growing them at home, and that had even basic data in it about what you should be, how long you should be growing them for, what humidity, what temperature, and so on. So that was that aspect. Second aspect was, I've always been a huge foodie. So when I was working at EY, Deloitte, wherever I was in the world, at Deloitte, we were in Belgium. So um, anywhere I go in the world, I try and go to a Michelin star restaurant or something and do a taster menu. And there is a huge overlap in terms of the products that they use in all over the world, in higher end dining, of course. When it came to things like working with Chopped, they'd have to give us the specifications because they were different leaf, larger leaf products, etc. But so there was already like that knowledge that you can go to a lot of restaurants in London and you'll bet your bottom dollar that you're going to see micro coriander, right?
Mm.
Some people eat it, will eat it. Some people will just scrape it to the side because it's just decorative or something. So that's that second element, so the prior knowledge. And then the third bit was testing. So that probably ate away, I would say, 3 to 5 months of the first, from when the farm was active. So, which was, time when we could have been generating revenue, but clearly, when you set up the business at the beginning, you have to know what
Yeah.
to grow and how to grow it properly. Otherwise, you're going to set up, upset your customers.
That's really amazing. And so you did that, and that lasted for 3 years. You got a bunch of school kids, not school kids, but let's say university students, like adults who are just peddling in the morning with big suitcases worth of
Yeah.
food to restaurants. What was the next phase after that? When did you feel that you have stabilized that a little bit, and when did the technology part kind of you started to weave in your work?
So we were generating okay revenues, and making profits on some products but not others. But it was a real skeleton crew. It was essentially me, Marie helping out when I was completely burnt out, and then obviously a couple of delivery people. I hired, kind of did my bit for the for the social side of things as well. I hired a few kind of ex prisoners, right, who were looking for roles, who other companies wouldn't look at them, and I'd say, look, I'm happy to take you guys in and give you this job. So yeah, I think, but over those, I guess it was probably from a year and a half in, I realized that what's going wrong? Why are we not, getting better unit economics? Because I'd been trialing things as well, and I've been getting marginal improvements and so on, but not to
Yeah.
the level where we could actually make it a large scale successful business, without obviously raising capital or something and building a larger site. So you're limited to that box, that initial site that you've built,
Yeah.
and you're limited to the technology, and that's the biggest deficiency that I found. The systems that we'd been sold, very very manual, a lot of plastics. So for example, where you grow the products on the trays, you've got kind of molded plastic, and
Yeah.
you're literally having to get in there and clean it with a toothbrush to get the algae out, right? No automation, no integration, no data feedback apart from, which is manual, which is an extra job, and no people to help me to develop these things. So that's when I met a couple of really good people, and we did kind of a pre-seed, which was for a couple of 100K, which was tremendously helpful, and they still today remain very much involved, or not involved day to day, sorry, but in touch. Although I'm sure at some point they'll want an exit. And then the main transition point came, despite the fact that we'd raised that capital, it still wasn't quite enough, because then you fast forward to kind of 2019, 2020, we got to a point where we were like pretty much out of cash, right? And we
And
weren't.
Jamie, can I quickly ask, like you raise the cash, and that is for developing. Is it just for growing the business, or you had specific technology that you wanted to bring in? And
No. So that was really the pre-seed was working capital
okay,
to keep the business going, and get more customers and so on. Because going back to kind of my schedule, when I was working 7 nights a week, there was very little time, especially with kids, to then also then go out and get the business. So I'd come back, then I'd sleep for like 3-4 hours or something, and then I'd get on a bus or something to central London, and go and see the chefs. So it was like it was not really a sustainable business model because we didn't have enough staff or the right staff. But ultimately, for me, it came down to the inadequacies of the technology.
Mhm.
So the working capital helped, but not enough to get us to actually our ultimate goal. And then in 2019, 2020, as I said, we'd pretty much run out of cash. And I'm not joking here. We were packing our bags, putting things in boxes, preparing to move to Paris, where my wife is from, and kind of start over and
Oh,
just
really? So it literally just went dead then?
we literally were, yeah, it just wasn't, even though like all the customers, they love the products, and we loyal customers, and all these things, it just was not sustainable business model. And that's why and I'll go back, and actually this links to the fact that I don't believe in shipping container farming, because actually being able to compete with the traditional growers and so on, and even other forms of CEA, you need scale, you need money, you need many different factors. So yeah, there was a day, I can't remember what day it was. I could probably go back and look, but we literally had things boxed up. And I was approached by an EIS fund, or EIS, for your viewers, is a tax incentive scheme
In UK, yeah.
for angel investors to invest. And they approached me, and I said, "Okay, cool. I'll meet you. I can't meet you tomorrow, but I can meet you the day after." And they came down to our site in Deptford, and I mean, the luck couldn't have been worse. There was a national grid outage in the area, so we were literally, I don't know, 5 minutes away from the site, walking through Deptford, and yeah, the whole building power went off. Okay, and it was obviously not our own building, no backup generator, so I can't show them through a dark space, right? So we went over and we sat at a tapas bar, and spoke for 3 hours and walked away with 4.1 million quid.
Amazing.
So
Wow.
they
So
hadn't even
you,
seen the farm.
now that's the story, Jamie, right there. It's like you just packed your bags and the power just went off and you just raised 4.1 million after that.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
So yeah, I mean, and I was, I've had a lot of discussions with people about that moment. Some people, like, who, you could be religious and say, this was meant to be, or this was just pure blind luck, or it was just, I don't know. There's no way to explain it.
What was your feeling when it happened?
I think that if you put in the work, it's like karma, right? I align a lot with Buddhist principles. I believe in reincarnation and things, and so for me, I think that we'd put in so much hard work that we deserve that as a family, and that's why that happened.
Can you think of any technical reasons where you be able to sort of, I'm picturing things in my head that you said that bags are packed up more or less, and power is there. There's no kind of like demo going on about, so it's just purely the history of your work. You're sitting down at the table and you're just explaining things to the guys for 3 hours.
Correct.
What was the, and this can probably be some insightful thing for founders raising money as well, that pitches don't look like YC pitches. Pitches sometimes, literally, most of them are the coffee chats. You sit down with someone and then you raise money. Can you remember that? What were the things that they asked, or you communicated that kind of convinced them there and then that yes, we should invest?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I have like huge memory blanks from that period of my life. But apart from a couple of things like that, I think they, well, without sounding arrogant, they believed in me. They had to. In any company raising money, have to believe in the founder. And so obviously they quizzed me a lot about, who I am, what, what are my goals for the company? Where do I want to take it? With this money, what would we do? Um, what's going on in the market? But to be honest with you, I think it was more about building. Of course, they have to believe in the business case,
Yeah.
and there's always risk. And we've seen that because we've seen a lot of companies fail in our sector, a lot of companies. But I think just building that rapport and having that face to face, a couple of glasses of wine as well, probably
That
helped.
certainly helped.
Probably helped. And I'm sure there'd be a lot more founders raising money if that were the case, or if they're in a similar situation. But yeah, I think, of course, they ask all the typical, technical questions. They'd seen some videos. We'd had some BBC coverage, for example, and we'd been in the paper and all that kind of stuff. So, and because we were using very simple systems, really, I think they kind of knew what the tech was. It's not like you have to do a huge amount of technical due diligence. It's more about who are you, where do you want to take the business, what's the vision, what's the strategy for the next, let's say, 2 years, when we may need to provide more capital, for example. And I'd expressed the pure view, which was risky, but was that I actually don't want us to be a grower. And when I say grower, actually using that farm up there to grow produce and sell to the market, despite the fact that we had, we were servicing restaurants, owned by Marcus Waring, Tom Akins, Mindful Chef we were working with, as I mentioned earlier. So despite all that, I said, no, I want to mothball everything we've done, take that experience of all of the issues with the systems and build a system that we think the market needs. That nobody, I'm sure that other people were thinking about it globally, but that's what we felt the market needed. I mentioned the word integration, and then that's kind of what set us out on that journey.
Jimmy, so I'm going to talk about so I think, if I'm not wrong, this is where the technology part became more crucial. And as you just pointed out, I think somewhere I read that you mentioned that, if I'm correct, saying this, a cultivation as a service or growing as a service is what you call the model.
Crop science as a service.
Crop science as a service, which is something that that came around after that capital injection.
That's way more recent.
Okay, that's way more recent then. But so what happened when you got the capital? The businesses just kept on growing as, are we just going to grow for a while, or how did you become where you are today? What was the in between journey?
So the building that we were in Deptford, we were actually on the farm was on the top floor, and below that there was
And how big is, can I ask Jamie, how big is the farm?
Oh, I mean, this was only several hundred square meters.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
small.
When I mention farm, I feel like acres and acres of stuff.
No, well, I
In
wish,
depth
right?
for.
But then comes more risk as well. But yeah, a couple hundred square meters, which, funnily enough, there's still farms setting up, repeating the same mistakes, using the same tech at the same scale, not recognizing that the market is calling out for a premium product in how it's produced, but not at a higher price point. I mean, you can sell it at a higher price point down some channels, but without going on to some big segue, I believe that we're in trouble. Let's just say it that way globally in terms of food production and water as well, which is as important, right? And things need to be sold at price parity,
Yeah.
versus imports. So in recognition of those, so they were kind of like, we had a, when I say we, I hired a couple of first C-suiters. So there was Darren James, who's our chief project officer. He'd worked for 30 plus years in National Rail and Siemens, on automation and all kinds of different things. But a real kind of gritty engineer. Dr. Jennifer Bromley, who'd come from British American Tobacco. She was the head of gene discovery and computational biology. It's quite a nice job title.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Channels Walker, who basically led on all of the software piece.
Jamie, how do you, if I were to ask you to put your business hat on, how do you decide what kind of executives to hire? What is it, like a trial period, or you just knew exactly these are the people you need?
So Darren was through a contact
Okay.
because somebody essentially that I knew at the time said, this guy's looking for work. And then I met Darren, and Darren was instantly so interested in it. And like, we were literally sitting, we were sitting in a bar. Sorry, I keep talking about
Yeah,
bars, but
the alcohol is a constant theme.
no. I mean, I say bar because there was a bar in the workspace in the building.
Yes,
where
it's
you had
like
the
a,
farm.
like a sports bar, I would say. Yeah.
No. It's just a
normal bar,
like a pub or something. Yeah. So it was. We were just sitting there, and we had a piece of paper, and we're just kind of like writing down all the different elements, and at the same time looking through to the space that I was referencing, which was a former coffee roastery. The business had just gone bust, so again, a really good timing,
Yeah.
in the sense that there was an opportunity for us to take the lease on for that. Again, not a huge space, but very high ceilings, and kind of a good size for a lab, to relative to 4.1 million sounds like a huge amount. It's really not when you're talking about developing all this tech, right? And you've got to get the people, and you've got to pay them.
Jimmy, now you just used the word lab instead of a farm. What's the distinction for the listeners?
No. When I say lab, I'm only using it in the context of it. This was the space, the lab that we used to develop the components, which would end up being our vertical farming system, our end-to-end vertical farming system.
Okay.
So, there are many parallels between labs and vertical farms in terms of environmental control and operating procedures and all that kinds of stuff. But it's not used in that context for here. So yeah, we just set out on that journey. Then we actually started to, we developed the first system pretty quickly, and yeah, I think we were quite confident with it. To break it down, you've got things like, we had to design a fully automated seeder. We had to decide on different materials that we wanted to use. Now, pretty much all the vertical farming sector uses plastics, which I mentioned earlier, the issues with, you have to wash them, you have to change them out, and maintain.
Jimmy, seed you mentioned, is it a machine that lays the seed in the? Because I've seen, if I recall, I've seen the one which are used for like traditional crops out there. Like it's like a kind of like a hole, and you fill it up with seeds, and the machine. It's just behind a tractor, and it just kind of runs through the field. What do you mean seeder here?
So seeder is like a, maybe if I take a step back. So each of our trays, we decided to go for a 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter tray. You then choose your substrate, and then you wet the substrate, and then you put the seeds on, right? If you're doing that manually, There's obviously a massive cost to that. The bigger the farm, the bigger the cost, and so on.
Yeah.
In some geographies, actually, because of the cost of labor, that can make sense, and you don't need a really advanced farm like ours. But we chose to develop the advanced farms for various reasons. The problem with like kind of hand seeding, and I literally hand seeded tens of thousands of trays over those first 3 years, is it's very inaccurate. You know, if you have even a couple of seeds touching, they may not germinate properly. So what the automated seeder, which is really the kind of first or second element of the end-to-end process, where you don't have humans involved, is you have we have needle seeders in multiple rows, where they will driven by Diana, and whatever inputs we've put in, will literally lay the seeds perfectly, and we're talking about like millimeter precision. So you will get a
Wow.
tray that's perfect that goes through, and it goes through this production system like on a conveyor belt.
It's kind of like an assembly line for.
Completely. So I have always talked. I mean, I'm not going to compare us to Amazon, but I am going to for in this context. If you look at the Amazon warehouses where they've got these kind of bots going around, it is that it's production lines. It's eliminating all the inefficiencies and the bottlenecks that existed in the farm before. So getting rid of the hand seeding. Now you do have to hand seed some products, and there are still things that we're working on for those, so that we don't have to do any hand seeding at all. But that would then go down. We then built what's called a kind of, it's like a turntable thing. So you turn the tray, goes onto the system in the germination system. So germination towers or trolleys will stay in the dark for however many days and germinate. And then when it's ready to germinate, and that's determined by Diana, the software, it then will move through our robots, which have been probably one of the biggest challenges in developing. These are, to describe them, I don't know, imagine like a long railing system, maybe 12 or 24 meters long, that has has two poles on it, with platforms, and it can move on 3 axes. Hence why we call it an XYZ robot. So the next element of technology that we developed, which is arguably the most well, not the most important, but one of the most important elements when it comes to improving efficiency in the farm, reducing the amount of human labor that has to go in. So you're reducing pathogen risk as well through that. Are these things called the XYZs? So they're basically robots that operate on 3 axes, and they will go and they've got like kind of a platform on them, and they'll pull the tray from the germination units, and they will have a pre-assigned. Imagine a very long steel canal with kind of rollers on it, and it'll be pushed onto that, and on that you've got light, and clearly you have many levels. So you've got lots of different columns, lots of different levels, and lighting, irrigation. So aeroponic or hydroponic, depending on
Amazing.
the
So
customer.
you essentially, so far, what I've understood is that from deciding to what to plant, the saturate material, the seeding, to which stage the sort of germination, that's literally all automated at the moment.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Jamie, wouldn't that become expensive for crops to, if you want to go to the consumer? Does that makes it cheaper if you're operating on a big scale? Because I'm clearly thinking that tech that does all of that specific robots I have to buy, I can imagine from putting my business hat on that down the line, yes, you can see the savings, but the initial it feels like a bit of a capex to these things. Um, so does it make sense to? I mean, as we were discussing before that before the podcast, that I can go out and buy those tomatoes for pound 66 of them, all same color, all year round from Tesco. But I think for the farms, and looked at some work from James Tyson, the founder of Tyson. He has like a very big, like a kind of strawberry farm, and I'm like,
It's very
okay,
successful as well, yeah.
yeah. And I was like, okay, the scale kind of has to be that big for the unit to be that much. And even then, the farmers are making profit on that, the retailers, the distributors, and a pound 60 for cigs. There's still a lot of profit. But again, it's in peas, it's very little. So I'm like, and that's the economy of it just I couldn't wrap my head around. So how does it for you that do you think for your sort of end-to-end system that you laid out, is it currently running profitable for everyone involved, or you're in the capex kind of a phase that it's going to be profitable 100% down the line?
Well, the capex is undoubtedly, if you want to do a proper vertical farm, and when I say proper, you need scale, because with scale you get when we're so I didn't mention, but because we haven't got to that point yet, but we built our own manufacturing center where we actually buy steel direct from the commodity markets and fabricate it, and we have these big robots shaping things. So yes, there's we're talking about for proper farms that we're actually talking about today. We're looking at 40-50 million pounds plus, right? But the important thing is, by having that scale, if it's designed properly, and it's automated, moving on to then hopefully in the future being autonomous, then yes, it makes sense. We do a lot of commercial modeling. Nobody invests in a farm if obviously they're not going to have a sufficient enough return for their investors. But you referenced a lot of cheap products there, and there are more products that are not possible to grow in vertical farms within the whole vegetable category than there are products that can be grown. That's for sure, right? Because if you think about vertical farming, we're limited by height.
Yeah.
We're stacking in vertical layers. So our mantra as a vertical future, since that kind of 2020 period, and moving forward, and if you speak to other vertical farming companies, they will agree, well, at least the ones that are doing it properly, is that you need scale, and scale unlocks the ability to get the raw materials to build the farm cheaper. You have greater purchasing power, and the productivity, I guess the positive externalities that result from the automation, which will eventually become autonomous once you've got enough data, kick in. In like a shipping container, why would you do that? Because you've got a very limited market. You've got very limited growing space. Shipping containers and things are great for putting in the middle of a city and teaching people and kids about food and education, and then selling some niche products to Michelin star restaurants and so on. And that's kind of how we, as I said, how we started. But if we truly want to compete, and if anyone wants to stand up and say that a vertical farm is going to address food and water insecurity, even in developed markets, then you have to have large scale farms. These don't need to be in cities. They can be 100 miles away. 100 miles away is better than importing produce from Kenya via Holland, via distribution centers, via packing centers, then on the supermarket shelves. Then they've got a couple of days shelf life. Completely not sustainable in any way, and it's going to get worse with climate change and wars, and many other factors. So the message is that, yeah, you need to look after your national food and water security. Now, I caveat that by saying it's not the solution for every crop. If you walk down a supermarket aisle, there will only be a very small percentage at present that we can grow in vertical farms because of the way that vertical farms are
Yeah.
stacked and so on. And a lot of it also is to do with root system in space, because there are plants actually have huge root systems that people obviously don't see.
Yeah, yeah.
So at the minute, we're really limited by leafy greens, herbs,
Cress and kind of stuff.
strawberries. I mentioned, alternative use cases as well, like forestry, where we've been working for many years and shown that actually by using our systems and the science within our company, that we can dramatically increase the survival rate of a tree that's going to be planted, and that's another project that we're doing.
That's really amazing because, I mean, it brings me to the future part of the company's name, the vertical future. Yes, you're definitely not going to be growing corn in there or like lentils or anything like that. That's not really. This is for. But would you say that you can or?
You can, but should you? Is the question, right? It's kind of like when people come to us and say, "Yeah, can you grow this?" Well, yeah, we can, but you have to pay like 20 times higher for it, because the unit economics of that particular crop do not work. Like, you're not
Mm,
gonna put an like an apple tree or something. It's
yeah.
just ridiculous when people make those kind of claims. Now, you mentioned one of I think there are 5 or 6 key crops that effectively provide the human population with about 75% of its
I would
energy
say
globally.
rice, wheat, and
Maize, things like
yeah.
that, and we know about what's going on in Ukraine. There are issues in Vietnam with rice. Things are getting worse and worse and worse.
And how are you seeing this space? I mean, you probably have the pulse on the news.
So, I mean, we can grow those things, but they're not going to be at commodity pricing. And a lot, I mean, for example, wheat can grow. I believe, I'm not a plant scientist, but up to 1.5 meters, right? And also has a very long growing cycle, which means you're using more energy across that growing cycle, which means it makes it much more difficult to compete with what is an already developed global market, growing that product in many different areas. Now, the interesting question is what happens if in 50 years the climate has changed so much that actually all these places growing all over the world can't do it. Now, in that case, my kind of hypothesis is that it'll be a mix between vertical farming systems and glass houses working together, and potentially some outdoor growing, depending on the time of year and the temperature and so on. But the sector kind of converging, instead of just at the minute kind of separating and saying, right, we can grow some of these crops. I think you have to pull the best value propositions of each of the different ways of growing to then address the overall problem. And that's already starting to happen. But wheat, as an example, is so far away right now. And then the other thing that needs to happen is then needs to be serious breakthroughs in seeds, so seed varieties. So we did an Innovate UK project, and we found, I think it was from several hundred years ago, going back in a seed bank, a variety of spinach. And spinach is usually a loss leader for growers, but everybody loves spinach, right? Well,
Yeah, it's
I'm not.
available every
I
day
mean,
on
I
Tesco.
actually
Yeah.
don't like spinach, but most people like spinach, right? So what we found is just through looking back in the seed bank, this is an even amazing innovation, right? We found a variety of spinach which had the morphology, the shape, and the characteristics, and worked. The unit economics worked, and the yields doubled, like literally overnight. So suddenly you've got a crop there that's a loss leader
Hmm.
that you can actually then grow. But gene editing is going to be the thing that we need the most. And it is happening. You've got lots of companies doing it. Obviously, they're only focusing on, only going to do, I don't know, maybe one crop at a time. It's going to be a long process. Yeah, I think these are the elements that need to be brought together as in, let's call it, a CEA ecosystem
Yeah.
in order for us to really address the problem instead of everybody getting in their silos and just saying that they're the best at everything.
Jimmy, you are a really big leader in terms of speaking internationally, and I see a lot of your engagements. When you speak to head of states, talking about national security, national food security here, you've spoken to prime ministers of Iraq, from Malaysia. What are the concerns from that part of the world that they're talking to you? Are there, and is it something? I mean, of course, there's war in in Europe going on at the moment, and that's why I said you do have pulse on what's happening across the whole world. What are people most concerned about, and what are the kind of solutions to that you can propose?
I'm glad you asked this question because so for our particular systems, because they're more advanced, high tech, and I also reference back to the point that sometimes automation, deployed in developing markets where labor is very cheap and people really, really need jobs, it's maybe not a good thing to actually put our system in place. So yeah, when I sat with the Prime Minister of Iraq, who has a big interest in agriculture, his main concern was water, which was really refreshing. Excuse the pun, to hear, because usually when I sit down in front of people, they just talk about food, but they forget about what is the water infrastructure, how does it look in their country. In Iraq's case, they estimate that by 2040, the land of two rivers, which is effectively what the country is called, is going to be dry. And that services 99% of the population. Some of that's due to, I think, kind of upstream activities. I mean, you just have to pick up a newspaper and read what's happening globally. There were kind of like these kind of clandestine water wars going on, and I don't think people appreciate the impact that this could have on populations and population migration
Yeah.
in the future. There was, I haven't looked into it as much as I should have, but there's been a big dam built in North Africa, which could cut off part of the water for the Nile or all of it. So we have to think about these things. I think when I spoke to the Malaysian Prime Minister, I think his concerns were more around supply chain, and how they look. It was more of a general kind of national security um, element, also a national food security discussion. So I think it varies. I mean, I also went on a tour with the Lord Mayor of London, newly appointed last, I think, November. And that was really interesting because we went to Bahrain, we went to Kuwait, we went to Saudi. Um, we met with the founding family of Kuwait. We met with obviously all the ministers from the different countries and so
Yeah.
on, and sovereign wealth funds. And yeah, it's really our main interest in terms of deploying our systems at scale is the Middle East, because that's where you're going to have the most acute issues. Fine, you can also argue places like Africa, but as I mentioned before, the unit economics and the type of food that they eat in Africa and other regions of the world doesn't align with what we produce. Now, if you look at the Middle East or a place like Saudi, actually you see American products sitting in
Yeah.
the supermarket aisles. It's becoming a lot more affluent. There's a lot going on, and yeah, they're sleepwalking into a food and water insecurity nightmare, or situation. And that's not just the case for Saudi, by the way. I'm talking more generally about MENA. Some countries are doing more than others. Others don't care as much.
Yeah, Jamie, I want to pick your brains on the current situation that's going on. I mean, we can't deny it. The war has happened and it's still going on. And with the new American administration, there's a new wave of kind of tariff wars going on as well. And I think it affects a lot of sort of day to day commodities a lot. I was watching a documentary that I think some avocados from South America, when they were being shipped over Mexico, I think when they were being shipped over to America, how the tariff war is going to dramatically change and pricing and all of that. So it affects. So how I'm trying to get your brains on that. It is is it as a policy that you look at it, that as a country we know that by 2040, in case of, let's say, some countries in Middle East, are we going to be running out of the supply, so we need to look into alternative. So is it a policy on paper, or do you think that people really understand the gravity of ever changing kind of geopolitical things as well, that we should be growing everything more or less of our own as much as we can? Policy versus actual groundwork, where do you think the world is at the moment, and which countries are leading?
It's interesting because your analogy and I guess what's going on in America right now is an analogy for kind of what we're punting, to people. Look after your own country, or at least make sure the essentials are looked after. That people have jobs. That you can have your own. That you have water for the population, and you're using it most effectively,
Yeah.
and so on, and obviously food. So, but the tariff piece, I mean, I think it's nuts, to be honest. I don't think most people, I mean, tariffs have been going on for many, many years, right? But the levels that we're seeing now and the type of rhetoric that is being talked about really is not helpful, because I think a lot of, first of all, I think it deflects from some much more important issues that we should be talking about. And secondly, I don't think people understand what tariffs are, and well, sorry, a lot of people understand it, but I think Joe blogs in your general population, if you ask them to explain how a tariff works and the sheet you have to fill in and who actually ends up getting hit, and so on, won't understand it. So
Because to add to that, I think it's literally such an uncertain thing, especially in terms of food. I was thinking, I was looking at the documentary, that the pace of these things had. I'm going to come to the AI part of it, but there's another discussion that with the AI, the capex that you do today is for 5 to 10 years ahead. You are developing centers, you're buying land and do all of that, hoping that there's going to be need for that. So let's invest, let's buy land, let's put the farms in, let's get the electricity and da da da, and then we do that. But the tariffs, I think they dramatically are influencing the long term projects and the short term. So suddenly the cost of long term investment goes up, because if there's an administration in any other, I mean, it's America has been certainly leading into, they lead with policy, and I think the world kind of really loves sometimes following up to what's going on. So the economists are suggesting that now the American administration has done something. It sets a precedent that, or you can do it between different countries as well. And I was just thinking the other sort of short-term uncertainty that you today, okay, 1st of April, we're gonna come up with tariff. It's gonna be 25%. You know what? We reached a deal on 3rd of April. What happened to the avocados we got shipped on 2nd of April? Like, are they part of the deal? Are they not? And I think with the unit economics, as you're saying, it just wreaks havoc on producers. And I think it gives an opportunity for people who control capital markets to take really high advantage of that. Do you want, either you're shipping early with the products which are just have 2 day shelf life? It's just dramatic. And I'm just thinking, would countries would like to escape all of that or protect themselves that, okay, now the precedent has been set, and shall we just look into that? And from that perspective, I'm thinking, like, are people approaching you more and more that, okay, I think we should be looking into that ourselves?
We haven't had a short term. I think it's too early to say if there's been any impact or change in ideology with respect to vertical farming. We certainly haven't had our phone more phone calls than usual, or indeed and people that we've been talking to mentioning tariffs and so on. But I think longer term, yeah, I mean, it is a big risk because I think whether we're talking about, if you've been watching the news, we're talking about car parts or cars, and the fact that they think that, for example, America expecting us to buy Dodge Rams and put them on our little English country roads. Go figure,
Yeah.
that's why we're not buying them, guys, So I think when it comes to food, what I would say is, and people won't like to hear it, but food prices will increase over time. It's just gonna happen. I mean, food prices do increase in general. They increase very differently in other, depending on categories. So, for example, the elasticity, for example, in things like meat, is much higher. Fruit and veg is a little bit lower,
Jimmy,
and
what
so
do you mean by elasticity in that for listeners?
yeah, I mean, if I so kind of the rate of change.
In terms of pricing, you mean?
Yeah, so like the variability. So think about a rubber band.
Like how easily it is to fluctuate the prices of a
Exactly,
product.
yeah.
Okay.
So and I'm probably going to get murdered by actual like professional economists on my definition there. It's probably
I'll save you, don't worry.
hopefully it's not wrong. Yeah, I think I think people need to prepare for hard times when it comes to food, and any product. And I think it's really easy to sit there. I do, as I say, I do a lot of talks and podcasts, but it's very easy to sit there and say everything's rosy, and innovation is going to solve everything. Well, innovation takes time, and innovation doesn't solve everything. It's just one very, very small aspect. What solves a lot of the issues that we've been talking about is governmental cooperation. People signing up to treaties and following through on them. Us figuring out how to do some things locally, and how to the things that we can't do locally do sustainably with other countries, right? So I think America, if I interpret it correctly, and what's going on there is there's a misunderstanding certainly at the top, that we can just produce everything and we have all of these materials and we can build a $5 billion plant overnight, and then we don't have to rely on any other country. But the reason I call it a good analogy is because the way that most industries now have, I mean, most industries have been interwoven globally
Yeah.
over time to become the way they are. And you know, pulling that apart and reinventing the global system would be a monumental task and would end up costing more anyway, right? So that and it's the same with food. Food has always, for example, we don't have the right conditions to grow bananas in the UK, and that's probably something that we never will grow. For example, even in CEA. So it may be that in the future, things like that, people will just have to kind of give up on and maybe change their diet or something if things get really, really
Oh,
bad.
that's a big one, Jamie, isn't it?
I mean, but it's plausible, right? And if you look forward 5, 10 years, no, I mean, but look forward 100 years and think about what the climate could look like, what the population could look like, and where they've gravitated towards, and think about access to these products. Who's going to access the products? It's not going to be the working class. It's probably not even going to be the middle class. It's going to be the top kind of 1%.
Wow, that's a great prediction. You're saying that literally the foods that kind of I grew up on enjoying, you grew up on enjoying, we're gonna be left out of them. And unless I'm earning a super super high income, it's like the two Dutch tulip wars kind of go on then.
Exactly, for imported products, I think.
Hmm.
In countries where you're producing, let's just stick with bananas. If you're in a country where you're producing bananas, then there won't be an issue. But like in the UK, for example, and in most developed European markets, the US, all over the world, developed markets in general, we are so used to having the luxury of being able to get pretty much any food product we want, right? My prediction is that even the kind of more basic products, prices will go up. You'll have scarcity across the board globally,
Yeah.
and the countries that are currently or at the time expected to be exporting, stick with bananas, to let's say, I don't know, households in China or I don't know, or the UK or whatever. Scarcity goes up. It's going to have a massive impact on price.
Yeah.
So in the worst possible world, we're going to get to a situation where you've almost got an international tendering process for where products go, and those products are still going to be overpriced, and they're going to be gravitated towards the upper classes, which is another reason why we need to set now. I mean, this is a long-term project. We need to be setting up domestic food production for all, right? Where we're not saying, you don't earn this much money, therefore you can't. Imagine a state where you're walking through, I don't know, a Tesco or an Asda, or on the continent a Carrefour, and you can only buy 10% of the products that are in there because of what's happened globally. I'm putting and for me, these aren't even really doomsday scenarios, because if you actually look at trends over time, and I don't know, small temperature variations in southern Spain, or shifts in season, where we get all of our kind of most of our kind of bagged salads, right?
Yeah.
That caused like 100% or more inflection in price overnight. Yeah, I think we're in for a rough ride with a lot of products. So we need to think about what we do, and that action has to happen now. Because we have all of these grandiose conferences every year. We have the COPs and so on, and yes, loads of really good stuff is done, especially in climate tech and so on. But when it comes to food, I think people need to forget about the fact that we have had a lot of failures in vertical farming and in wider CEA. For the investors, they need to change their outlook. They need to have a longer term outlook in terms of returns for their shareholders.
Yeah.
And that's why we've seen a lot of the VC funds kind of withdraw, because they know that they can't make 3 to 5 year returns, decent returns on commodity crops. So I think there needs to be real change. And the problem is, people don't know that they need to do that until it's too late.
Yeah, it's not yet, as I was telling you that I can go to Tesco right now and yeah, tomatoes are always available, bananas are always available, and humans are just pretty bad at that. Jamie, I have three big overarching questions for you. Number one, would you think it would be the case that as the global food production of things that, let's say, dragon fruits and like bananas, that things we do import into the UK that just never grow, there would be I mean, minus the exoticness of these things, because you can get the nutrition of those things from somewhere else. Do you think, based on something we touched before, the genetic editing, do you think that is going to take another rise, that we're going to have new kind of breeds of crops or vegetables or fruits that are of similar nutrition value? And I guess because they can be grown in vertical farms, they're going to be the new sort of things, and you're just going to forget about bananas per se from South America.
Yes, I mean, something that's a huge question, because that really talks about changing consumer mindset completely, right? But we've already done projects on, we found a crop called amaranth. Amaranth has 40% protein compared to chicken, which is 25%.
When you say you found this, was this a vertical future found, or?
Well, no, it wasn't like us going through the jungle and finding some new species, but it was no. I mean, amaranth is a known crop. It is. There are many restaurants. I'm guarantee you've probably eaten it. It's a red crop, but it's usually used in microgreen form, and
Okay.
not typically grown to full size. So, yeah, I mean, finding a crop that, is 40% protein versus 25 is a big thing.
That's right.
And I'm sure that, I'm not a geneticist, so I can't really properly or fully answer your question. But I do hope that that's the case, that, we can find ways to either rapidly grow crops, and also change. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest limiting factors is how, I'm looking around the room now, and I'm seeing these plants, right? These plants have over hundreds of thousands or millions of years or whatever, learned to survive outside, right? Mind you, these are indoor plants, but
Yeah,
I'm
they
talking.
can survive
Yeah,
outdoors.
I'm talking about plants in general.
Yeah.
Plants have learned to survive outside through means, which is why they're still here. But moving them now, what's happening with climate change, whether or not your viewers believe it's man-made or not, the statistics support what's going on, and there are many things that we hear in our sector, and more broadly, that completely support what's being said, for many years now. So yeah, it's more about changing the morphology, the shape of the crop.
Yeah.
Which a good example, and this is a bit of a segue, but it's another project that we've not completed, but are working on as part of an Innovate UK grant is getting our systems into space. And we our system should be on the Axiom space station by 2026, 2027, which is a big achievement. It's not really what we set out to do as a company, clearly, right? Or, I'd rather sort out the planet, right? But what's interesting there is if you think about space and space exploration, a lot of it's about weight,
Yeah.
and space, So, if you can learn to modify a plant that has really good properties, the protein, etc., and the energy that astronauts need, then that's a great thing. And actually, you can then bring those learnings back to planet Earth. And I think there've been about 50 or 60,000 consumer products created as a result of space exploration since the 1950s or 60s. So I hope that we get the same kind of learnings from plants. Plants are, as are, we say a lot in. This is not a company. Sorry, not a term that we badged, but plants are biofactories. They can create materials, they can create medicines,
Yeah.
and they can be eaten. What an amazing thing, right? So it's that power of science that we need to grasp. Problem is, and what I'm told, is these things take time, right? They don't, it's not a overnight thing. And the question is, how quickly can we, going back to this point of around collaboration in the ecosystem, how quickly can we have these different companies not only deliver on their research, but then collaborate and then implement and address a lot of the problems here on planet Earth,
Amazing.
one of billions of planets out there. But
Jamie, do you think I was actually going to come to the space part, but I'm glad you mentioned it up. But in terms of space, we had a guest recently. We discussed this topic came up there, not in terms of the food, but do you think that space exploration, all of that, is one of the most purest human endeavors out there? And our guest sort of informed us that, and we were discussing that the moment some individual goal kicks in because of individual company or a country, that kind of goal gets a bit colluded. I mean, we want humanity to be multiplanetary species. I mean, that's one of the bigger sort of reasons for space exploration. And I'm thinking that coming back on Earth for that, we have something called the NATO, which is like, oh, this is protection of these bunch of people because if another part of the world something happens, we're going to band together, we're going to defend ourselves. And I'm just thinking that hearing you sort of speak for about food and everything, that do you think as the future is looking more and more grim for what the current food systems are, they need to be more developed? Do you think a similar strategy would be developed where countries are banding together that, what, let's say, I don't know, next to the two rivers in Egypt or in Iraq or somewhere, that's where we're going to set up shop, and it's a shop for the whole world. You can contribute towards it, but that's where we're going to sort of develop everything. Because I feel like the space part of it in exploration is a kind of an extension of this endeavor here. Oh, we have done really well here. Let's extend it even further. But if you're fighting on Earth, collaborating for space through food seems a bit of a disconnected endeavor, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, I think we are involved in that particular project because I mean, yeah, it's obviously taken some time and work, and there's always a trade-off with our kind of main goals. But we've contributed, and I think it's another advancement in terms of science for our company. But speaking really frankly, why are we looking so much at space if we haven't actually sorted out the problems on Earth, which continue to get worse and worse in every way? and inequalities and so on and so forth. But your idea around, I mean, it would be very difficult to implement, right? But I think that it makes sense because we need to look after the planet, and if we can't do that, why are we looking at going and terraforming another planet?
Yeah.
You know,
And I'm being selfish and being in UK that I know my bananas are in danger. So I'm like, how am I gonna band up with someone else? Like, okay, let's get the supply constantly running, because some countries would be in a position by just the sheer nature of location that yes, we can produce more rice, more wheat, more this. But again, I've just had that. I'm just thinking loudly. I think, but that's just bringing us back to global economics. That's what it is
yeah.
at the moment. We trade, and that's how we kind of survive. And yeah, so I think it's like a full circle back that we don't want to become like I only eat what I grow because that's how humanity had been. And then I think recently it's not too far that I think. Would you say like after really 1950s that where the world trade really boomed up
So it
and
was the 1960s,
yeah with the
the
EU
kind
and
of
everything there.
the food revolution,
Yeah,
as they call it. But yeah, it really does come down to geopolitics
yeah,
and things. And but if you think about the imagine just going into any supermarket or corner shop or something and seeing the amount of products and variations of products and variations of companies. The ecosystem is so big, even just for food.
yeah,
And I think it has to come down from, it has to be top-down policy that's aggressive in order to bring about change. And I think that there are some good examples of globally where they are starting to do that, good or bad. But yeah, I think it's such an I like using the word intertwined. It's an intertwined system in everything, in cars, in whatever you want to talk about. And yeah, I don't I think without some form of government intervention, and not just talking it up, actually people taking action, people standing outside the big conferences with signs protesting. I support people protesting. That's not going to change much, right? Unless you've got 3 million people out there, right? What's going to change things is politicians, governments, and so on, focusing on the right things. At the minute, what are we focusing on? We're focusing on how much government should be spending on the military, right? 2.2%, or I think even countries like Poland now are spending 4% plus or whatever.
yeah,
Are these the right things, right? Because considering the fact that I don't know, one country could just launch a nuclear weapon and then we're all gone tomorrow, right? So it frustrates me a little bit because with we have productive conversations with politicians and different different governments and so on. But then suddenly the agenda changes because the news changes, because we see this as a bigger threat, and so on. And all the while, all the work that's going on is being forgotten, or funding is being reduced.
yeah.
And another one, and I know I'm jumping around a bit here, but is the fact that government changes
Every
every
4 or 5 years, yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I have a disabled brother who he's older than me, but I'm technically his parent for legal purposes, right? And they're cutting disability benefits. So it's really it frustrates me that we don't focus on the core things that people need: jobs, food, housing, that
yeah,
that core stuff. when we're spending, billions of pounds on missiles and wars and so on. And that's sad for me and frustrating. But we push on, and we try and find other sources to fund and to accelerate our journey. And what I've found over time, and this goes back, this isn't just recently. What I found over time is that it's usually the private sector, the families, the intergenerational wealth that are interested in this for various reasons. We didn't talk about our Series A raise. In 2022, we raised 22 and a bit million, and then 10 million the following year. And this was all to develop our technology. This all came from families. It didn't come from government, unless you're at a kind of county level, and only a few counties are doing it. For example, in the UK, they really don't have an interest, right? You can't get unless you're in the network, you can't get a sit down with a politician and then them develop a program and siphon off, a couple of million quid to build a vertical farm.
Yeah.
It's not, they say it's a priority, but actions speak a lot louder than words.
Jimmy, we're talking about families here, and you, for listeners, you have your daughter in the studio with us today. What's the optimist future that you are building and you have the vision for them, that through your actions or people like yourself, the doomsday, the kind of things we talked about that can be averted, and you're not a flash in a pan. It's almost a decade that you've been in this industry. What is your optimist hope that you want to see, and how are you sort of peddling it and pushing it out in the world?
Well, AI, or I was on a panel actually last week, and there was, we were talking about actually should it be called AI, and I can't remember who came up with the term, but they were very, very experienced for decades, and they were talking more about intelligent systems, right, for now, okay? Because AI is something that just gets thrown around, right? Things that I'm really optimistic about are advancements in things like healthcare and longevity. Longevity comes with its issues, though, because you've got pensions, and then you've got people, all that kind of stuff. But that kind of stuff, mobility. Yeah, I just think that it's difficult to anticipate the impact of AI, but I think that it's going to have I mean, we're already seeing it, right? I think it's going to have the biggest impact on almost everything that we do. And it's going to change the way that we think about things, right? If you look, for example, there've already been some breakthroughs in identifying tumors and things alongside humans using AI. If we could implement that for food, right, for genetics, so for the genetic research, right, we don't have a genetics facility, but and I don't quite know how all the inner workings of it, but I'm sure that that there's something there that can be done. So maybe my it's a bit like when you do a financial model, right, you don't say that everything's going to go right. You set your baseline, okay, which is based on some reasonable assumptions, and you do some sensitivity analysis and so on. This should kind of, like, my kind of doomsday piece is kind of like that baseline, right? But do I think that we'll actually be there? Hopefully not, because I think the last, I don't know, 100 years or so, I mean, how many technological breakthroughs have there been? that have then, in vaccines, in everything, that have happened so quickly that we hadn't anticipated. And if you look at the rate of change in terms of innovation, um, uh, it's incredible what's happening right now. But then I go back to my point, just to caveat that it's not just innovation, it's people working together, it's governments, it's policy, it's money and financial backing, and so on. So yeah, for my daughter sitting behind me here, Gabrielle, and my other two kids, I am optimistic for them. I think the world will look very different, right? I think we all end up we might end up getting I don't know, some kind of sorry, I forgot the terminology, but you know uh, just a salary, a standard
Universal
yeah, sorry,
basic income.
universal basic income, and
Yeah.
it could be that, right? Who knows? What I'm more worried about, actually, I'm less worried about my children. We're not from a ultra wealthy family. We're just what I would describe as a standard, I guess, middle class uh, working working family in the UK, right? I'm more worried about the billions of people that are nowhere near as well off as even poorest people in London, right? That's what kind of keeps me up at night a bit. So I think there are great things to look at, but there's I mentioned this in the last talk I did. There's an MIT model. I went to a leadership course there last year, and they look at like all of these, well, not all of them, because we could talk for hours, right? But they look at all of the different variables that are linked to it's mostly a climate change model, but that's important. And they've been working on it for, like, I don't know, decades, and it's incredible if you look, because you can change all of the different things. You can say, okay, if we stop fossil fuel use now, what happens? Well, that would be really bad if we suddenly stopped it, right? But maybe gradually phasing it out over time is great. You can change pricing, all this kind of stuff. But the scary thing, and we had a great professor who'd been working on these things for 30 years, is I mentioned the impact of innovation relative to everything else going on is actually quite small. So it's important, it's very important, but there are other levers that we should be pulling, and if they're not pulled properly, and we don't work together on a global basis, then the points I've made around my children and being fairly optimistic, may not come out to be true.
Jimmy, I have two questions. Two things I'm going to combine together. Number one, what is, to the listeners out there, what is your message uh, that you want to leave out there? And secondly, we have this actually a tradition in the pod that we established, that we ask the guests that what is that one book that has really changed their life. If you tell us that book, we're gonna find out a person out there in the audience who would like to have that book, and we would ask them why they would like to have that book. And we would, it's kind of a raffle. We would give the book out to them anywhere in the world. It's an audible, physical copy, whatever, and we'll help them connect with you. So two things, yeah. What's your message, and perhaps there's a book that you really love that we can give out to someone so they can take an inspiration from that.
So the first one's really easy, and I think I should focus on food and water to a degree. Um, I'm not going to pitch my systems or vertical future systems to people, but what I would say is, if you can grow things yourselves, whether it's on, in your garden, if you have one, whether it's on your windowsill, do it, right? Do your part, right? I do believe that, um, everybody doing something small and what they can will ultimately help. And self-sufficiency there's a book which I don't know the name of, but it's not my favorite book. But it's almost like a guide to kind of, even if you're living in a city or a village or in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, um, little actions that you can take to actually to yeah to bring about a greater good, right? So nothing's in vain. So yeah, I think that would be like my message, and I think most people would agree with that, right?
I'm following that. I don't know. You can see the plants around. But I try to grow a lot of things at home to a and I think I found a newfound appreciation that when I sometimes you have to throw away food, for some reason it starts to the after the attempt of growing them, it starts to bug me now that oh my god, that lettuce that is just throwing away took like 6 8 weeks or whatever to grow, and it's such an effort because I literally try to grow tomatoes at home, and you have to have I'm not gonna get into it because there's so many funny stories. Like I kid you not, Jamie. I literally there was a point in I so there was some aphid attacks on chilies and all of those things, and I looked up online. They're like, you know what? I was like, I'm not gonna spray them. You know what? This should be at home, and this I'm just gonna eat them. I'm not gonna spray them. There was just no way around. And they're like, either you spray them or you have to get kind of natural insecticides, which gonna sort of take the aphids away. So I literally, I 100% know this is gonna bug me forever in life, and I'm gonna say this, but I literally bought from Amazon those little red bugs. What are they called? I forgot the name of them. Ladybugs.
Oh,
Literally, I bought them from Amazon. They came in literally in a pack, and I offloaded them onto the plants. I mean, they kind of all flew away, but I just recalled that moment of me doing all of that. I was being in that hopelessness that I'm trying to do something, and it costs like £15 to get like 20 of them, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the cost of the chilies is just gone way past.
yeah.
Like,
So yeah, and that makes me slightly caveat what I'm saying, in that um, earlier on I mentioned that our mantra is you need large scale food production
yeah.
for price parity, right? Just because I'm saying that we should all do our little part doesn't mean that we should be saying that actually the future of food production should be in people's living rooms.
Yeah, certainly
It's
not. I
certainly
can vouch
not.
for that.
Some a single mother living in a council estate, or in a high-rise block or something. It's not going to do that. Or to your point, right? May not have the money for it. So that's definitely more of a kind of middle class suggestion I've made, and if you can, do it, right. Now, in terms of books, I'm actually not much of a reader.
I know. What was your favorite movie? Because I know you're absolutely movie buff and
Oh,
you
my
love.
favorite movie.
I'll put you in a tight spot there.
Oh, that's an even more difficult one. I like movies like Legends of the Fall. I don't know if you've seen that. That was a 1990s movie, had Brad
A
Pitt
bit
in it.
early, yeah.
Just a lot of movies that have really good lines, good cinematography.
What's your favorite dialogue?
Favorite.
What's your favorite dialogue from a movie that you just remember for life?
There's no particular standout dialogue from that movie that I remember.
I'm just joking in general that you kind of feel like reminiscing about that, and kind of in the back of your head comes again and again sometimes.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, there's a bit where there's brothers. One of them gets killed basically, and yeah, essentially the father comes back and yeah, says something. There's a bit there. It's got Anthony Hopkins in it as well. He's a father.
That's amazing.
But I'm going to add another one or two movies because I watch so many movies kind of to go to sleep and stuff, which is not healthy. But
We've been there.
yeah, I've been a big fan of Dune since I was much younger. My grandfather would read me the books, so when they said that they were going to do a new Dune movie, I was like, wow, great. And I think Dune 2 is just a cinematic breakthrough. And then to end on a romantic note, I really like Pride and Prejudice. So
Nice.
and my favorite saying from that from Mr. Darcy is I love you most ardently. And wouldn't it be nice if people spoke using these old-fashioned
Yeah,
words
English.
now, right? I feel
Yeah.
like we've diluted our language, and that actually goes back to book-wise. I have read books, the Jane Austen novel Pride and Prejudice. So I've read
Yes.
all of hers, and I've read Lord of the Rings trilogy. That was probably my favorite, and of course Dune.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
amazing.
very broad. We could literally have an entire podcast on movies.
I'd love to. We have a banking one podcast. We have the Oxford Talks one. I think we're gonna start a movie one, and you're gonna be the first guest. And I think
I'd
we'll
love
be
to.
talking 3 days over.
I'd love to.
But I think I'm just gonna share mine. I think it's kind of relates to. It makes me think of you in this moment. That there's a scene in Interstellar when they're trying to dock after they go to the wrong planet and they're going back up, and the TARS, the robot, it says to Matthew McConaughey like, "Oh, you're trying to dock, but it's not possible," and he just says, "It's not about it. I know it's not possible. It's not possible. It's necessary."
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think it kind of sums up our conversation today.
Yeah.
It's not possible. Yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah. And there's I so I'm just gonna just follow up with one other one. There's a really good quote at the end of the last James Bond movie. I'm very intrigued to see who the next James Bond is going to be, but I don't remember the full quote, but it's like, the function of man is not just to exist. I don't think it's a full quote, but the function of man is not to exist. I will use my time, which resonates with me because it means that we're not just here just to be here. We have to try and take action and do things with our time.
I would love to end on that note. Jamie, absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being on the pod.
No problem at all. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.